Let us pray. Gracious Father, in this good land where our history is rooted in the reality of your living presence, we pause to acknowledge our dependence on you and to thank you for all the blessings of life. At this time, we're especially grateful for the blending of resources and dedicated people which have made this graduation possible. Grant that new knowledge and skills acquired may now be applied generously in the healing of persons. On this threshold of new opportunities, we would place each graduate in your special care in the measure that each looks to you for strength. May your grace nourish body, mind, and spirit in the days to come. Be with also each family member without whose support and understanding this achievement would not have been possible. Grant that all of us may use the gifts and talents we have been given to alleviate suffering and to enrich life. And in your mercy, grant us the humility to turn to you, not simply in weakness where life gives way, but also in strength at the center of life. We celebrate then this day in your joyous name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to introduce the student officer who has been president and a spokesman for this charter class the entire 4 years of its existence. And as his last official act in his present grade, Lieutenant Maceo Braxton, Jr., United States Army, will deliver the class valedictory.
Thank you, sir. The Honorable Mr. Packard, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Sanford, members of the Board of Regents, Surgeons General, and other honored guests. First, I want to thank God that this day is finally here and for the beautiful weather that we have today. I am delighted at the opportunity to address you today and want to thank my classmates for that opportunity. If it were feasible for the whole class to address you today, we would want to thank a number of people, many of whom are in the audience, who've helped to bring us to this point in our lives. First, we thank our parents who have endowed us with ambition, persistence, and a quest for service to our fellow man and to our country. We also want to thank our teachers at every level of our education who have given us the tools we have used to solve the daily problems we have encountered and that we will continue to encounter in the future. We thank our spouses, families, and friends for their love, patience, and loyal support over the years, without which our many accomplishments, if still possible, would be less meaningful. We thank the Board of Regents for their dedication, time, and loving efforts in transforming a dream into a tangible reality. We thank both those in and out of government who have had the foresight and thus worked hard, first to open our school, and later to keep it open. And if we could, we would thank the late Honorable F. Edward Hebert, who once undertook the crusade for a military medical school about 30 years ago, and finally saw its establishment by law in 1972, and saw this class grow ready for graduation before he passed away in December of last year. Finally, we thank those at the university and at the supporting hospitals, institutes, and especially the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, who have helped to make our medical education a success. And on behalf of the charter class, I thank you all. As students and as a university, we have come a long way since the beginning of classes in October of 1976. I recall flying home for my winter break a couple of months after that and sitting next to an elderly person on the plane. I noticed before takeoff that she would periodically eye the uniform I was wearing, and not far into the flight, her apparent curiosity got the best of her, and she asked me, "You're in the Army, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "My husband was in the Army." And then she asked, "You're an officer, aren't you?" I said, "That's true." "What do you do in the Army?" Being modest in those days, I answered, "I'm a student." She said, "What school do you go to?" Proud of the fact that I had been accepted and that I could pronounce the name, I unthinkingly answered, "USUS." She replied, "Use who?" Trying to explain, I said, "USUS," and I spelled the name, U-S-U-H-S. U-S-U-H-S, she hesitated, and then she said, "But my dear, as an officer, shouldn't you already have graduated from high school?" Needless to say, we had a long conversation after that, in the course of which I outlined a few facts for her. For instance, I told her the purpose of our school, to educate doctors for the 4 uniformed services with a commitment to national service. I told her of the need for such a school, explaining the frequent shortage of medical doctors in the uniformed services and the resultant less than optimal doctor-to-patient ratio. And I informed her of the increased cost to the government by having to recruit non-government private physicians to make up for those shortages. After assuring her of the sound medical education we were receiving, I also told her of the special areas in our curriculum and experiences unique to our school, such as military applied physiology, airborne school, and the military medicine course, to name a few. At the end of the flight, we thanked each other for the conversation, and she told me that she was a more informed American for having spoken with me. She said that she was pleased that Congress had established such a university, and also was pleased at the special preparation we were getting for our dual profession. I was delighted at her pleasure, having been in the military prior to my matriculation at the Uniformed Services University, like most of my class. I realized that it was really the people of the United States for whom I worked and for whom I would work in the future. Serving them directly by providing health care to their sons and daughters, and indirectly by helping to keep our armed forces healthy and strong. I appreciated that it was from the people that I ultimately draw my support and my authority as an officer. She was, in a symbolic and indirect way, my employer. It also occurred to me that our mandate as a future armed forces doctor could truly be said to come from the United States Constitution itself. That is, as students, we are in preparation to help promote the general welfare of those who will, in time of need, provide for the common defense of our nation. I want to emphasize today that it is the American people's job to scrutinize us and our accomplishments. As an as an institution and as individuals, this is the fact. If the American people are not satisfied with our performance, then obviously we must direct our energies toward improvement. If they are pleased with our performance, then we have done our job. But we should not allow another satisfaction with us to be the cause for our complacency. We as professionals must also scrutinize ourselves, in other words. Certainly, we should take pleasure in a job well done and should gain satisfaction from our occupations. But we should not allow that pleasure to become a substitute for self-improvement and for progress. To become satisfied or complacent with one's achievements or to lose one's desire to progress is to either take a stand at the brink of the spiraling road of decline or to take the first step down it. This is true for everyone in life and in every walk of life, except for those who are innately lucky or blessed. It is especially true for us, the graduating students, who have already labored long with self-discipline and patience to gain the recognition that we will achieve today. But we have chosen two professions, both of which, out of their particular nature as professions, call for us to strive for excellence in service to people. Today, we will take the Hippocratic Oath, the Geneva Variation, and we will take the Oath of Officer Commissioning. Once taken, we are obligated to strive for excellence in two areas of endeavor. The focus of our thoughts to achieve this are these three principles: hard work, self-discipline, and patience. Also, let us always maintain our awareness that we have two callings, medical and military. We have received the training that we need in both. We have developed a commitment to do both, and it is through the blending of our two professions that we attain our unique and special purpose. We have accomplished much and received the best education, but the fact is that our test is just beginning. In a very real sense, we must go out into the world and sell ourselves to our hospital commanders, department chiefs, residents, colleagues, military unit commanders, patients, and to the American people themselves. We must show them the competence we have learned, maturity we have gained, our desire to always improve, and our dedication to the service of our patients and our country. Truly, the American people are the purpose of our university. In it, they have placed their support, monies, and hopes. We as graduates owe this to ourselves, to the university, to them, and to the future classes. We hope that future classes will do the same, to continue to progress, to remember our two honored professions, and to work hard and patiently. For many years to come, we will still be just beginning the task that our founders have set for us. God willing, we will all achieve our goals and continue to achieve our goals. I am confident that this will occur. We, the charter class, pass to you, the future graduates of the Uniformed Services University, the flame of our ideals, and hope you will remember them and think of us kindly in future years. And so I say to you, not farewell, but so long. Thank you.
Lieutenant Braxton, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce the Honorable David Packard, Chairman of the Board of Regents and Acting President, who will present the Board of Regents and the William P. Clements Awards. Packard.
Will Ensign O'Grady please come forward? The Board of Regents Award has been established to be the highest honor a graduating senior can achieve. The recipient has a superior academic performance record and has shown his concern and interest in the care of patients, the investment in the social and intellectual aspects of medicine, and the devotion, the empathy, and the dedication and the personal commitment required of a physician. He has proven his capability for hard work, both as an individual and as a team member, and he has performed at the highest levels of duty and honor expected of a commissioned officer. The Board of Regents, with great pride in his accomplishment and with confidence that he will have an outstanding future career, is pleased to make this award for 1980 to Ensign Terrence Charles O'Grady, Medical Corps of the United States Navy. Now, our honoree is especially honored today in being the recipient of another award. The Association of Military Surgeons of the United States has established an award to be given annually to a graduate of the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in the School of Medicine. The award consists of a check of $500 and a life membership in the association and a scroll. This year, the Association of Military Surgeons award is co-awarded with the Board of Regents Award to Ensign Terrence O'Grady. And my congratulations to you.
There are not many times in life that an Irishman has a hard time thinking of something to say about anything, but I think I'm rapidly reaching one of those right now. In some ways, it seems that this word is a little superfluous, because 4 years ago, when I became a member of the charter class of this fine institution, that was one of the greatest things that had ever happened to me. And to have been a member of this particular class, whom I've known from a group of individuals 3.5 years ago to some of the closest friends that I've ever had, that's more than enough award for anybody. I would also like to thank some special people to me. First and foremost, my mother and father, who are here to share this with me today. And also my wife Johanna and my daughter Allison, who have made so much of this possible and truly represent the center of my life. And to the other members of this class, I think you're the most wonderful people that in the 25 years I've been going to school I've ever been associated with. It's been a long time and a hard road, but I think looking out in the small pool of faces that I recognize here and the huge sea of faces that follows behind us, I think we're going to give them one hell of a run for their money in this school. Thank you so much.
The William P. Clements Award was established to be given annually at each of the service academies to that uniformed faculty member chosen by the students as the best teacher. The award, donated privately, bears the name of a public servant, a man who is now the governor of the state of Texas, and who during his tenure as Deputy Secretary of Defense had a keen interest in education, and I can attest to the fact that he was of great help to all of us in establishing this university. This award is being given to young people with a sense of history and tradition, and it's appropriate, I think, that this first award go to a man whose professional life has been founded upon the knowledge of the histories of medical science and of the military. His unforgettable lectures are enlivened by examples gleaned from literature, and literature in its broadest sense, and from a great deal of personal experience. From his teaching, his students take a full perspective of the workings and the ideals of their dual profession. And will Colonel Joy please come forward? It takes great pleasure in endorsing the decision of the students by bestowing upon Colonel Robert T.J. Joy, Medical Corps, United States Army, his first William P. Clements Award. And I want to now read the citation. You are a forceful military officer and a careful, reflective scholar. Your knowledge of history and science make you reverent of tradition, but ready to question it. Your breadth of learning, quick wit, vivid speech, and love of teaching have profoundly influenced the first class of this medical school. Your selection assures you an honored place in the university's traditions of academic excellence and devotion to the nation's service. And so it was a great pleasure, and on behalf of all of the members of the Board of Trustees, we're greatly honored to present this award to you, Colonel Joy.
You're not going to believe this, most of you who've been in the classes, but that vivid speech has deserted me. Because this is a student award, do not know truly how much it means to me, because I think it reflects back again how much I care for you and how much you've cared for me. God bless you all.
It is my privilege to introduce our commencement speaker at this landmark graduation. The importance of this occasion in reflecting the goals and aspirations of the Uniformed Services University is personified by our speaker. Dr. Thomas's career has encompassed the goals which we have set for our students: an awareness of health and its maintenance, an understanding of disease, its prevention and cure, a sense of scientific inquiry and academic excellence, compassion for people, an understanding of leadership and its attendant responsibilities, and a commitment to the service of our country. A graduate of Princeton and the Harvard Medical School, Dr. Thomas is no stranger to the military. He served in the Medical Corps, United States Navy from 1941 to 1946, being assigned to the Naval Medical Research Unit and stationed in Guam and Okinawa. He's been consultant to the Surgeon General of the United States Army. He has held academic positions as chairman of pediatrics, of pathology, and of medicine at the University of Minnesota and New York University, as well as deanships at the New York University School of Medicine and the Yale University School of Medicine. He is now president of the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. Dr. Thomas's tough tutorship and charisma as a scientist, leader, have launched many others into teaching and research careers. Among practicing physicians, he is even more widely known for his provocative Notes of a Biology Watcher. These essays have led in turn to 2 best-selling books. The Lives of a Cell won the National Book Award for Arts and Letters in 1974 and has been followed by the equally distinguished The Medusa and the Snail. Dr. Thomas has chosen the title The Invincibility of Science. Lou, on behalf of the charter class, its faculty and friends, welcome.
Members of the class of 1980, families, faculty, regents, Jay. It's a great pleasure and an honor for me to be here for the most crucial point in the experiment in which you are all engaged. Clearly, from the fact that you are all here, about to come into possession of your MD degrees, the experiment has up to this point been an unqualified success. And judging from the additional fact that you are not only the first class, but also, by all accounts, an absolutely first class, the outlook for the experiment in the years ahead is promising. In the course of your education here, you will, I hope, have learned enough about medicine to catch a glimpse of medicine's greatest and best kept secret, which is that we really don't know very much. The secret is there at the center of things, partly obscured by the immense amounts of data which you have, of course, been obliged to master. Scientific medicine is a relatively new field as sciences go, and we are really only at our beginning, with most of the important things about human disease still out there waiting to be discovered. We have a long way to go, and for most of the distance we will be dependent on progress in biological science itself. It is this matter that I wish to discuss. What I'd like to show is that there are great uncertainties throughout biology. You might think, reading the papers, that we've already learned most of the essential facts of life, and it is therefore just a step away from mastery of all medicine's problems, and it is not so. Puzzlement is a biologically determined universal characteristic of the human species. We've never been able either to make sense of the world or to stop trying. And the more we learn about the way it works in its details, the less sense it makes as a whole. In the last 300 years, we've been using science to find out more and more about the fine details. The intricate items are all there, presumably findable, and the method of science seems to be a more satisfactory way of getting glances at the whole system than any of our earlier efforts, which consisted mainly of making up stories to explain the world and our place in it. There's some satisfaction in the range and complexity of the details. The physicists and cosmologists have uncovered long lists of natural laws, but they are all puzzling, and the biologists are on their way. But I think this century, now nearing its close, will be remembered as the era, perhaps the beginning of a long era, in which human beings discovered the full extent of human ignorance. The explanations provided by science are tentative, provisional, subject to being changed by next year's science or by reinterpretation of yesterday's. The scientists themselves live nervous lives, always worrying uneasily that everything they have learned will be upheaved and overturned before the ends of their lives. The metaphors of physics, filled with quantitatively precise significance. All numbers are fabricated to avoid any implication of final meaning. They are light-hearted, offhand slang, strange particles and charmed particles, particles with color and taste. The very beginning of physics was the starting up of the universe. Before that event, there was no physics, and no physicist can be persuaded even to try thinking of what it was like then, for it was nothing. And scientists have a hard time thinking about nothing, and even harder making up stories about nothing. The beginning is assumed to have been an explosion, for which the accepted throwaway phrase, now a fixed term in physics, was the Big Bang, usually in capitals, the Big Bang. There's a kind of diffidence, charming in its way, in the selection and acceptance of this banal, sparsely evocative label for such an event. Also, a psychologically interesting avoidance of what would have been a more accurate term, but unacceptable because of its symbolic undertones. There couldn't have been a Big Bang, of course, not even a small bang, not even a thud. For without an atmosphere to conduct the sound, it would have had to have been an absolutely silent explosion. The proper term would have been the Great Light, but this would embarrass the world of science. Biologists have had their own great story for a century now, telling it and retelling it with new embellishments as new facts come in about natural selection and the evolution of species. It is the most satisfactory of all scientific stories, powerfully able to explain almost everything about living forms, a great solid body of information and insight to exult over. But it too had its beginning, in the time before its beginning, a mystery, a nothing. It's hard to think about as the time before the Great Light. The beginning was itself a first cell, almost undoubtedly, or highly probably, to put it more scientifically, a single successful cell at the very beginning, something probably in the shape and form of a bacterial cell from which all the rest of the conjoined cells and tissues of the Earth evolved. The physicists worry, when they do worry, that perhaps they've come almost as far as they can come. They've encountered a queerness in the arrangement of the universe which some of them are beginning to believe may lie beyond the reach of human understanding. The mathematicians, who used to be confident of comprehending anything that came along, now have Gödel's theorem to worry about, and a new anxiety about the certainty of their own logic. Biologists are slower and started later. They have not yet reached blank walls, and there are handholds everywhere. The worry for them is meaninglessness, the hard evidence against anything like purpose or design in nature, and the driving force of randomness. Puzzlement has not become less of a problem because of science, it is more of a problem. Long ago, it was easier to make up explanations. All you needed was your senses, an awareness of the things that could be seen and heard, and some company. With language, you could explain everything, and then the explanations could be embellished in the retelling until the stories became great stories. And now it is literally a new world, a world of information, and it is time to make up new stories. An intellectually fashionable view of man's place in nature is that there's really no great problem. The plain answer is that it makes no sense at all. The universe is meaningless for human beings. We bumbled our way into the place by a series of random and senseless biological accidents. The sky is not blue. This is an optical illusion. The sky is really black. You can walk on the moon if you feel like it, but there's nothing much to do there except look at the Earth, and when you've seen one Earth, you've seen them all. The animals and plants of the planet are at hostile odds with one another, each bent on elbowing any nearby neighbor off the Earth. And genes, tapes of polymer, are the ultimate adversaries and the only real survivors. And the human situation is absurd, nothing more, nothing less. This grasp of things is sometimes presented as though based on science, with the implication that we already know most of the important knowable matters, and this is the way it all turns out. It is the wisdom of the 20th century, contemplating as its only epiphany the news that the world is a preposterous apparatus and we are stuck in it. In the circumstance, we would surely have no obligations except to our individual selves and, of course, to the genes coding out the selves. Well, I believe something considerably less than this. I take it as an article of faith that we humans are a profoundly immature species, only now beginning the process of learning how to learn. Our most spectacular biological attribute, which identifies us as our particular sort of animal, is language, and the deep nature of that gift is a mystery. We are aware of our consciousness, but we cannot even make good guesses as to how this awareness arises in our brains, or even for that matter, that it does arise there for sure. We do not understand how a solitary cell fused from two can differentiate into an embryo and then into the systems of tissues and organs that become us. Nor do we know how a tadpole accomplishes his emergence, nor even a flea. We can make up instant myths, transiently satisfying, but always subject to abandonment about the origin of life on the planet. But we do not understand why we make music, or dance, or paint, or write poems. And we are bewildered, especially in this century, by the pervasive latency of love. The most spectacular thing about us, which should astonish biologists more than it does, is that we are so juvenile a species. By evolutionary standards of time, we have only just arrived on the scene, fumbling with our new thumbs, struggling to find our weight, our legs under the weight and power of our new brains. We are surely the newest and most immature of all significant animals, perhaps 1 million or so years along as the taxonomists might define us, but probably only some thousands of years as the communal speaking creatures uniquely capable of manufacturing metaphors and therefore recognizable as human. Our place in the life of the world is still unfathomable because we have so much to learn, but it is surely not absurd. We matter. For a time anyway, it looks as though we will be responsible for the thinking of the system, which seems to mean at this stage a responsibility not to do damage to the rest of life if we can help it. This is itself an immensely complicated problem in view of our growing numbers and the demands we feel compelled to make on the planet's resources. There's no hope of thinking our way through the quandary except by learning more. And part of that learning, not all of it, but a good part, can only be achieved by science. More and better science, not for our longevity or our comfort or for affluence, but for comprehension, without which our long survival is unlikely. We should be paying more attention to our ignorance. It is here that our educational systems have gone most wrong, and especially in this part of this century. We've been spending all our time and energies from grade school to graduate school trying to master all the facts as though all or nearly all the needed facts were really at hand. In biomedical science particularly, we do not take the pains we should to make plain the depth of our ignorance about how the place works or how we work. Philosophy used to concentrate its attention here, pointing out and even systematizing the vast holes in our knowledge about nature and then making careful guesses to fill the gaps. And science should now be doing some of the hard work of this kind of teaching. The culmination of a liberal arts education ought to include, among other matters, the news that we do not understand a flea, much less the making of a thought. We can get there someday if we keep at it, but we are nowhere near, and there are mountains and centuries of work still to be done. One major question needing to be examined is the general attitude of nature. A century ago, there was a consensus about this. Nature was red in tooth and claw. Evolution was a record of open warfare among competing species, and the fittest were the strongest aggressors, and so forth. Now it begins to look different. The tiniest and most fragile of organisms dominate the life of the earth. The green chloroplasts inside the cells of plants, which turn solar energy into food and supply the oxygen for breathing, appear to be the descendants of ancient blue-green algae, living now as permanent lodgers within the cells of what we like to call higher forms. The mitochondria of all nucleated cells like ours, which serve as engines for all the functions of life, are the progeny of bacteria which took to living as cells inside cells long ago. The urge to form partnerships, to link up in collaborative arrangements, is the oldest, strongest, and most fundamental force in nature. There are no solitary, free-living creatures. Every form of life is dependent on other forms. And just as the differentiating cells of an emerging embryo can find the right niches in the right tissues by sensing messages emitted from the surfaces of other cells, the conjoined life of the planet is continually engaged in sorting out its parts, organizing itself into the complex tissues of the earth by the exchange of messages which read, this place is appropriate, move in and settle down, and that place will never be. The great successes in evolution, the mutants who have, so to speak, made it, have done so by fitting in with and sustaining the rest of life. Up to now, we might be counted among the brilliant successes, but flashy and perhaps unstable. And we should go warily into the future, looking for ways to be more useful and listening more carefully for the signals and watching our step. We like to think of ourselves as unique individuals, each marvelously different from every other, and we set great store on the human self as the center of the universe. We've constructed whole societies and their religions on the dogma that the individual person is the unique culmination of nature's progress and the most special thing around. At the same time, we've been imagining that there's a sameness, an absence of individuality, a sort of interchangeability among all the members of other species. The minnows in a school are, for all practical purposes, minnows, and versions of the same minnow. And mice are, of course, simply mice. Well, it is, as it turns out, not so. All creatures are unique selves. Minnows can tell each other apart as though they wore name tags. Catfish can do the same. The only genuine duplicates are the odd sets of identical twins and those strains of interminably and artifactually inbred mice that end up with interchangeable parts. There is nothing at all unique about being unique. But symbiosis, the spontaneous forming of partnerships, is a basic process and a fundamental need to be met. If you're going to make up a story about the Earth based on today's scientific information, it would be useful to have a third person to tell the tale. For this role, I will call upon that useful, sagacious, and ubiquitous gentleman known as the extraterrestrial visitor. Zipping through our part of the galaxy, his attention is caught by our small, suburban solar system, and he comes in among the planets, carrying along a number of instruments in a vehicle whose details I need not bother imagining. He spots the Earth and he sees the difference immediately, moving in for a closer look. No matter where he came from or what he has seen before, I take it for granted that his first reaction is an indrawn breath at its sheer beauty. I have no doubt that there are colonies of life elsewhere in the universe, and perhaps he has seen them all, but I choose to doubt that there can be many celestial bodies at the very springtime of their development, marked so extravagantly by exuberance, youth, and perfection of detail as this one. Let me change the story here to insert more time. He sees the Earth now, but he is one of the older extraterrestrial visitors and has been making periodic detours in our direction since the birth of the structure, the laying down of bones, say, 4 billion or so years ago, and taking time-lapse photographs, close up, clicking his extraterrestrial camera every few 100,000 years. Running the whole film through this year, say, what sort of impression would he have of us? I think he would conclude that his lens had caught the gestation still in progress of a stupendous embryo, clinging to a warm, round stone by what we call earth, or prophetically humus, as though attached all around by a kind of placenta and turning slowly in the sun. He would have seen this creature starting from a single cell, fertilized by lightning or ultraviolet light or cosmic rays or what have you. For 2 billion odd years, he would observe the formation of a sort of blastula, a huge cluster of cells multiplying first in the sea and later on land, all pretty much the same kind of primitive, non-nucleated cell. Then the film would show a green tinge here and there, and then with the appearance of oxygen, and thanks to the sun, an explosive emergence of new forms of life everywhere. New cells with nuclei, new collections of cells gathering together to form tissues, coral reefs, and finally roses and dolphins, and then at last ourselves, off and running, making metaphors and music the newest and youngest working parts of the planet. Embryos develop by making new parts and fitting them together, but this process involves, for many tissues, putting them into place and then abruptly destroying them to make room for other forms. These are known technically as transient tissues. When the nervous system is being assembled, for example, almost as many brain cells of the embryo are born and then killed off as the number finally used for the newborn brain. I would like to think that we are on our way to becoming an embryonic nervous system for the whole system. I even like the notion that our cities, still primitive, archaic, fragile structures, could turn into the precursors of ganglia to be ultimately linked in a network around the planet. But I do worry from time to time about that other possibility, that we are a transient tissue, replaceable, biologically representing a triad, something needing better means of perfection, and therefore on our way down under the hill, interesting fossils for contemplation by some other kind of creature. In my more depressed moments, I find this a plausible form of heart sink. But at better times, remembering how skilled our species is with language and metaphor almost from birth, and how good we are at science, and how spectacularly we excel all other creatures on this planet because of the emergence of Johann Sebastian Bach as just one example of what we can do as a species when we really try to use our brains, and remembering that nature is by nature parsimonious, tending to hang on to useful things when they really do work, I have hopes for our survival into maturity millennia ahead. Perhaps, after all, we do have a long way to go, but if this is so, we have a lot to learn, and I like that thought. Thank you.
Packard, on behalf of the faculty of the School of Medicine, I recommend to you that the degree of Doctor of Medicine be conferred on these 28 members of the charter class. Will the candidates recommended for the degree of Doctor of Medicine please rise?
By virtue of the authority vested in the Board of Regents by the Congress of the United States, and upon recommendation of the faculty and dean, I hereby confer on each of you the degree of Doctor of Medicine, and with its attendant privileges and responsibilities,